Hello and welcome to the HubFizz EcoBiz show, where you can get ideas to grow your business and make it greener. And today I'm joined by Julie Winnard from Jez Designs, and we're talking about embracing slow fashion and using eco materials. So welcome, Julie. Great to have you on the show.
Hi there.
Yeah, and looking very colourful there with all those prints behind you. So really beautiful. Julie is a silk painter and textile maker, and she likes reusing materials and items to upcycle or recycle where possible. And of course, this is really important in today's age, as we know that fashion is a big contributor to having an impact on the environment. So, how can we transition from traditional materials to more eco ones?
Well, there's a bit of a perception that new stuff is more eco than old stuff, but there's actually some very old textiles like hemp and linen, which are actually pretty good because they're crops where you use a lot of the crop to make the material, and they're grown without pesticides. They're very water efficient, things like that. So as a first step, if you look for things like hemp and linen when you're buying clothing, that's good. A sort of second step is things like organic rather than ordinary things like cotton. So organic cotton uses less water and less pesticide. You can find things like recycled polyester. I've just bought some tracksuit bottoms from, I think, New Look, somewhere like that. Other stores are available. And a lot of the fast fashion stores have started to look at using recycled stuff, which is good because obviously it stops the linear throughput model and it starts putting things back into the input side. My husband's just bought a shirt from Rapa Nui that uses reclaimed cotton, so things like that can be better. You have to be a little bit careful, but if you haven't got time to go into the full details, that's quite a good thing to do. And of course, buying secondhand, so buy something that is pre-loved because it's probably still fine. Sometimes people I know people that prefer buying used shirts and things because they're softer, and sometimes the older ones are made better. And then finally, things like viscose. There's a lot of different viscose fibres, and the more modern ones, if you go and look in places like Marks and Spencer's, you'll see fibres like tencel or lensing, and they're made with a very efficient process. So it's still more or less the same fibre, but it's made in a much more efficient green process than the old-fashioned viscose, which if it's just as viscose, that's what it's likely to be. And that behaves a bit like a natural fibre. So in theory, it should break down. I'm still trying to find out how well it breaks down in the environment because, of course, lots of clothes shed fibres. But it should do a bit better than the sort of back of the pack, if you like, is the sort of polyester and things like that. There's an argument that we need polyester because we can't clothe the whole world in cotton because we can't afford the land space and the sort of competition with things like food for that. But polyester and other things that are made out of fossil fuels are a bit of an issue, and they get mixed in with other things. So you often see things like polycotton, and I don't know how long we'll still have that in the future because that's really difficult to separate. The only process I know of that separates that when you need to get rid of it at the end, there's a chemical way of melting the polyester away from the cotton, which I think there's a UK company that does that and probably some others as well. So yeah, natural first, but look carefully at what it is and then just sort of think. And most makers are now starting to be a bit more kind of clear on that, and buying old previously loved things, extending the wear of your stuff, and just looking, getting a bit more educated, ask around, see what you can find out.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know that a lot of the sort of high street shops were doing that because I haven't been out shopping for so many years. A lot
it's
of my
quite
stuff
a niche thing.
So
if you go into a store like Primark or New Look or somewhere like that, it will be a small proportion of certain things, but they'll quite often make a big deal about it. So you can usually see it in the shop when they launch it. It's quite obvious. M&S go through phases where they have more or less. There's some shops which do more fair traded. So Monsoon had on and off has had a line which I can't remember the name of. It is something Love, and they're very embellished stuff because of course they do a lot of very beaded, very embroidered stuff. But they worked with women's cooperatives and communities to sort of maintain traditional skills, and therefore your dress, instead of being £100 will be £200, something like that. So it's a better model for the people that are doing the work. So there's a number of different things that are in there.
Okay, yeah, that is really interesting. And I know as well, like you say, a lot of the materials in that if they are combinations of stuff, they are going to be harder to break down So it is, you know, better going for sort of the more natural stuff. And so why do you think, you know, we should embrace this kind of slow fashion? I know you talk about slow fashion. What does this mean?
The slow fashion movement is different things to different people, a bit like slow. It sort of took its name from the slow food movement and borrowed it. But the idea is that we all buy far too much, which I'm sure most people listening to this will have heard about. So if you think about, you know, how many clothes our parents owned or our grandparents, we own so much more because we've got into this model of having the latest thing and the nicest thing, and because we're worth it and all that. So we buy too much, we throw a lot of it away, or we were throwing a lot of it away. Now that's happening a bit less, but people cycle things through their wardrobe very quickly. Young people still do that, hence the popularity of things like vintage and Depop. And what that tends to do is people aren't buying older stuff or recycling. They're buying stuff which is creating a big impact, and estimates vary, but it's something up to 1/5 of the world's emissions are connected to the textile industry one way or another, not necessarily directly, but indirectly through the crops and the logistics and all the rest of it. I'm not sure if that's technically correct. It depends where you draw your boundary, but it's big. And if you're not going out anywhere or going on holiday and flying, then actually your fashion footprint might be quite big. And then we wear it for a bit, and then it gets a bit bobbly, or we don't like it, or we get bored, or we buy stuff we don't wear. And then we get bored with it and we give it away, or we throw it away, or we pass it down the chain. And people now tend to give it to charity shops, which is okay. That's better than just putting it in the bin. It was all going in landfill, a lot of it. But charity shops only put out about 10–20% of what they're given, if that. A lot of it has to go straight to the ragman because they have so much stuff coming in, they can't use it all. So they have to nitpick and try and fish out the stuff they think they can sell. Damaged stuff goes straight to the ragman or goes abroad to be sorted, and other things happen to it. Some of that stuff is okay. It will get sorted. Some of it will get sold in other places. Some of it gets batched up and sold back here. Some of it will be upcycled or recycled. Some of it just goes out to places like Africa. Sometimes it does get bought, but for example, I think it's either Gambia or Ghana, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's wrecked the domestic textile trade because it's undercut the people that were making clothes, and now they have a huge rag trade. And there's even a name for this. It's dead white men's clothing, it's known as, because it's often house clearance stuff that ends up out there. And quite a large portion of that just sits around in huge piles. It goes into landfill, it gets, you know, blown around and destroyed. All sorts of things happen to it, or it goes around the world in shipping containers where people don't want it, which is happening more and more with plastic related waste as well. So the main way of slowing this juggernaut down is to buy less. So you'll hear of things like, there's been a campaign going called Nowhere New in 22, I think, was a campaign that's been going on. Or you get people talking about a slow fashion summer, which is where you basically commit to not buying nothing ever, but you don't buy anything new, or you try not to, and you excuse things like shoes and underwear because they're really difficult to source. But the idea is the first stop should be go to your ward. There's lots of different things which we'll come on to in a minute. Lots of things you can do to make yourself more excited about the things you've got, to make sure you use them and maintain them. And then there's also things that you can do to, you know, like go and look secondhand in charity shops, look in vintage stores, ask friends, do swaps, all sorts of things before you get as far as actually buying a new thing. And it's almost like a game to see how long you can go. There are people, I mean, I could probably get away without buying anything new as long as I could. Luckily, I'm losing weight, not putting it on. So that's a bit of another question. If you put on weight, it's a bit more difficult. But yeah, in theory, I could cope for probably 2 to 5 years without buying anything new, maybe just the undies end. So
yeah,
that sort of thing. So it's taken as a bit of a challenge to see what you can do if you really want to make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. So going into that, then what are some simple ways that we can be more eco-friendly when it comes to clothing?
The obvious one is to wear your stuff for as long as you can, and that means mending and things like visible mending. I'm just going to stand up and see if I can show you So these are ripped jeans that have been mended with what's called borrow stitch, which is now quite a fashionable thing to do. Okay. People with older jeans than mine who look like they're wearing armoured trousers because they've got so many layers of patches. So you can do things like that actually make your jeans funky, and obviously that's not everybody's style, but you can get your stuff mended. I've just had some pairs of trousers taken in by the local dry cleaners because I'm not great with trouser waistbands, frankly. So I've got 2 pairs of trousers that I like back that I can wear for another few years, where I've lost a bit of size, things like that. And also there are some nice things like shop your wardrobe. So take it as a challenge. Someone invites you to an event. We used to have this thing, we had to buy something new every time we went to a big thing. Actually think about what those people haven't seen you wearing. Go in your wardrobe and say, right, can I make myself an amazing outfit that I haven't worn before by using things that I've used before, but in a different combination? Sometimes it's a fun thing to do with a friend. And also there's a nice tradition that the Italians in particular have. They put, because they don't have a huge amount of storage and they buy things sort of long term, they have this big tradition in spring and autumn where they swap their summer and winter wardrobe round. And I've been doing this because my wardrobe's not been big enough to put everything in, which is a bad sign. So you put away your winter stuff and you have your summer, and then when the winter comes around, you start to think, oh, I'm a bit cold, or oh, I need a jumper and I haven't got quite enough jumpers. But then you go and get, when it starts to get to the point where you really do need to swap your clothes over to the warmer stuff, you go and get it all out and you look at it and you keep finding things you haven't seen for 6 months or not even worn for a year or two. You think, oh wow, I can wear that. I've forgotten about that. That's my favourite jumper. And it gives you a whole new lease of life on that bit of your wardrobe. And again, in the spring, when you get round to changing out for the warmer season clothing, and I end up with a sort of section of stuff like T-shirts and a few other bits, a kind of autumn, spring stuff that stays in the wardrobe. And then the winter and the summer stuff changes in and out, the light and the heavy stuff. But that's really good because it's like seeing old friends,
I like that idea, yeah.
And I know there is a bit of a thing about if you haven't worn it for a year, then throw it away. But actually, we have warm winters and we have cold winters. So I would say probably a bit longer than that for very hot and very cold weather clothing in this country. So don't just ditch it if you haven't worn it. Oh, somebody said if you haven't worn it for 3 months. And I'm like, have you not heard of seasons in Britain? So things like that, and also asking for swaps. So before now, I've lent my mother-in-law a jacket to go to a wedding in. My mother and I have exchanged things occasionally. Where one gets given a scarf that's more the other person's thing, or sometimes also you can ask somebody to remake something. So I've remade scarves for people where I've taken things and done borrow type stitching on them, stitched them together. I'm doing one at the minute. I can do that as a present for someone, but also I can do that if there's something that you like but it's a bit damaged. There's people who sew together old jumpers and make amazing coats and new tops out of them, that sort of thing. And we all specialise. So you could, if you've got a thing that you really love that you don't want to give up, you can get it made into another bit of clothing or a cushion or something like that.
Brilliant. Oh, lovely. I could talk for ages on this because there's so many tips, and you've mentioned quite a few in there, like Vintage Depop. I know there's lots of sort of rental companies now, vintage stores, secondhand shops. Where can people sort of find out more? I mean, I know that you're probably sharing information about this and that. Is there somewhere they can follow you where you sort of share?
If you Google slow fashion, I mean, it depends what channels you're on. If you look in Instagram or Facebook, or if you go on a Google hunt, the trouble is that the sector's changing all the time. So there's a lot of churn. So I don't really have particular sites that I can send you to, but there'll be every campaign, things like Nowhere New will have a new thing. If you Google slow fashion, there's quite a few upcyclers like me that use it as a tag, so it will show you the types of things. It's also worth, if you're going to go to a site like Etsy or Amazon, a bit less. There are some upcyclers on Amazon, but their whole model is, obviously mass selling you stuff. So my community tends not to be on there so much. But there's lots of websites and selling platforms. There are some eco-fashion platforms. There's a lady that we probably both know who started a thing called My Flair, which is to sort of do kind of slightly more green stuff as well. And there's also, you can, when you go and look in shops or online when you're buying stuff, look for stuff that says organic or says recycled, or you can find things like eco denim where they dye it with a lot less water. So it's worth looking at the details. If you're going to buy less, you've got a bit more time to be a bit picky, and you can maybe afford to spend slightly more. But also, just go in a charity shop. Go charity shop rummaging. There's so many of them in each high street. They do need your money, and it's quite a good challenge. I mean, if you're a particularly large, small, tall or short person, it's more difficult. But go and find people that make stuff, because they might be able to alter it to suit you. So if you find something that you really like, they might be able to change it to fit you.
Brilliant. Really good tip. Well, thank you so much. And I know you've got an Etsy shop, so they jezdesigns.etsy.com.
That's right.
And you're also on LinkedIn as well, Julie Winnard. So if anyone who's watching, do click on those links and go and check out Julie's stuff. And I'm sure that if you've got any questions or anything, you can leave them below and subscribe to us. We'll also do a newsletter, so sign up to that if you want this delivered to your inbox. And any questions you've got and want to go back to Julie, just get in touch with me or get directly in touch with her. So thank you so much for joining me, Julie. Such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. Yeah, we have gone a bit over time, but I think you're probably going to be in the flow and you're going to want to hear more and more. So yeah, thanks for staying with us, and we will see you same time, 11 o'clock next week. Bye for now.